You've found Nightfall Murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. Backpack straps tight in my fists, I narrowed my eyes against the ceaseless wind at the lip of the forsaken village. A constant, scouring presence. The gale keened around skeletal walls and tore through apertures where doors once hung. Stone fragments grated under my boots. Dust devils danced around my shins. My purpose here, to capture the remnants of this place, perched high on the hill, its photographic soul. Legend claimed the unrelenting wind drove everyone away, permitted no lingering settlement, yet some inexplicable gravity had pulled me towards it. Mounting a crumbling stone riser, I gained a narrow, winding path. Desolation breathed from every ruin. The nearest structure, a house reduced to a jagged corner, testified to the hill's harsh dominion. Timber shards, potential roof beams, lay strewn like bones, scraped across the earth by the wind's rough hand. A sound like heavy furniture dragged over stone. I pressed onward, the shutter clicking, capturing fragments. On the small display, rubble, deep shadows, a vast sky scrawled with racing clouds. A frantic rhythm hammered against my ribs, faster than mere exertion warranted. Utterly alone, yet a peculiar tightness constricted my chest, part thrill-seeker's exhilaration, part a creeping, formless anxiety. I'd anticipated the uncanny reputation, but not the wind itself feeling sentient, watchful. I paused before the caved-in maw of a well. Just then, the gale veered, slamming into my back. My jacket billowed, a frantic flapping that nearly drowned out my own breath. And then, another sound pierced the roar. My name. A single word, seemingly uttered inches behind me. My spine went rigid. I pivoted, a sudden, clumsy motion that almost sent my camera tumbling. Nothing. Only the wind hurling grit against a fractured doorway opposite. My mouth turned to parchment. A trick of the wind, I reasoned, a phantom echo in the gale. Yet my legs felt like water, palms slick with sweat. Clutching the camera tighter, I took one measured step back, aimed the lens at the doorway, and fired. The preview revealed only splintered wood against a jagged stone frame. Taking a steadying breath, I ventured deeper into the village's heart. The path coiled past houses, whose roofs had imploded, surrendering to the sky. Scraps of fabric fluttered stubbornly amidst the detritus. Twisted metal hinted at a long-abandoned hearth. More photographs. Occasionally, the wind would momentarily abate, allowing the crunch of my own footfalls to surface, loud in the stillness. My pulse still throbbed in my ears. Over my shoulder, again and again, my gaze flickered, half expecting a figure to detach itself from the leaning walls. Calm down, I chided myself, abandoned. The hour-long drive up had revealed no other soul, not on the winding approach, certainly not here. I emerged into what might have been a modest central square, dominated by a platform of weathered stone blocks, perhaps a place for pronouncements in a forgotten time. The wind swirled, rattling a loose sheet of corrugated metal on a nearby roof fragment. An insistent, teeth-grinding clang. Camera raised, I captured the square's bleak expanse. Then, a flicker to my right, a shadow detaching itself from the corner of another ruin. It seemed to retract the instant my head turned. My breath hitched, muscles tensed. I took a hesitant step towards it, poised for revelation. Nothing stirred. Rounding the corner revealed only a cairn of rubble and a battered wooden door propped against the stones. No footprints disturbed the dust, no sign of human passage. The wind surged anew, whipping grit across the ground. I stood, listening to the ragged sound of my own breathing, a knot tightening in my stomach. Gooseflesh prickled my arms beneath the jacket. Exhaling slowly, I moved on. Decision made, I approached one of the more substantial structures. Its roof bore a gaping wound, yet 2 walls stood defiant. The doorway yawned, doorless. I simply stepped inside. Shattered furnishings littered the floor. A table lay capsized, chairs splintered into kindling. Crockery fragments, some merely chipped, others pulverized, crunched underfoot. I fought the urge to imagine the lives lived, the catastrophe enacted, focusing instead on the tangible present, the visual record. Crouching, I photographed the wreckage. The camera's flash momentarily banishing shadows, illuminating dancing dust motes with each click. Then I froze. As the wind pressed against the outer walls, a sound insinuated itself into the gloom. My name, again. Sharper this time, not a muddled gust, but a faint susurrus, intimate, as if breathed against my very ear. My entire frame went taut. Heat flooded my face, my pulse escalating to a frantic roar in my ears. Motionless, holding my breath, I listened. My eyes darted, scanning the dim interior for any flicker of movement. The whisper ceased. Instinct screamed a warning from behind. I spun, sweeping my flashlight beam across the collapsed section of the roof. Empty space. The wind moaned through the breach, making surviving timbers creak. A tremor ran through me. My arms felt leaden, legs unsteady. The urge to flee warred with a potent, morbid curiosity, a need to find some trace, some source for the voice that knew my name. Rising cautiously, I played the flashlight beam across the stained walls, moving past the broken table. Glass shards fractured under my boots, the sound sharp, wince-inducing. I considered calling out, but my throat felt constricted. Suddenly, a heavy thump echoed from the corner to my left. I flinched violently, nearly dropping the flashlight. A chunk of ceiling plaster had detached, striking a dilapidated cupboard below. Dust billowed, catching in my throat, stinging my eyes. Coughing, I stumbled back towards the doorway, crossing the threshold into the open air as quickly as dignity allowed. The wind struck my face like a physical blow, immediate and harsh. I tasted grit. Back in the relative openness of the path, I fought for composure, leaning against a fissured wall, breathing deliberately. My heart refused to slow, its frantic beat a drum against my eardrums. Onward. Perhaps the next row of houses held purely photographic interest, distraction from this escalating strangeness. Threading a narrow passage between 2 leaning structures, I perceived new shadows pooling at the far end. The flashlight beam sliced through the gloom, but revealed only more rubble, weathered bricks. I pressed my back against the cold stone of the left wall, feeling its rough texture through my jacket. Heart hammering. That pervasive sense of observation lingered, a prickle on my nape, unseen eyes tracking my progress. The wind intensified, its voice rising. Loose debris skittered and clattered across the path, and woven into the gale, faint sounds like fragmented speech. I tilted my head, straining to locate a source, but the murmurs seemed ubiquitous, carried on every gust. Snatches of words, unintelligible conversation, something akin to a low chant or a muted song. My limbs felt heavy, my stomach churning. It had to be acoustic tricks, I muttered, the wind funneling through ruins, creating phantom echoes. I wandered onward, past another imploded building, until I reached a larger house, still boasting a partial roof. Its door, ripped almost free, hung precariously from a single hinge. I slipped inside. The air hung thick with must and damp decay. My flashlight painted a hallway with peeling, faded paint and a cracked floor. To the left, a large room beckoned, a former living space, perhaps. A stone fireplace stood sentinel, its chimney mostly surrendered to the elements. I aimed the camera, fired. The flash momentarily populated the room with stark shapes. I forced myself to ignore pareidolia, focusing on documenting the reality. A few steps further brought me towards the far wall. The flashlight beam found fallen shelves, books scattered on the floor beneath, their pages swollen and fused by damp. I leaned closer, capturing the image. Then, a distinct, faint laugh drifted down from directly above. My scalp prickled. I snapped my head up. The ceiling gaped open, revealing the skeletal remains of an upper room. My light swept across it, seeking an animal, any rational source. Only rotten timbers and the fractured frame of a bed met the beam. The laughter dissolved into the wind's moan. Swallowing hard, I felt the pulse pounding in my temples. Retreating to the hallway, I directed the light into another room. A kitchen, likely. Rusted pots and pans littered the floor. A few still clung to the walls, swaying gently in the drafts that snaked through the house. The wind howled, its pitch shifting, and within it, I discerned what sounded like a soft prayer. Not one voice, but many, layered, too faint to decipher words. My stomach clenched. I whispered reassurances to myself, my voice thin and shaky. Edging forward, a dark shape flickered at the edge of my vision. I spun, flashlight beam stabbing along the walls. Nothing. My breathing grew shallow, rapid. Tension radiated from my shoulders. I compelled myself onward. Pushing open a door at the back, revealed a smaller room with a wooden floor, an overturned cabinet, a pile of mildewed linens. Shattered windows offered free passage to the wind, which tugged at my clothes and stirred the thick dust. And there, preserved in the grime, footprints, old, certainly, but undeniably human shapes. My hands trembled as I struggled to hold the camera steady, capturing them. A visceral need for open air overwhelmed me. I exited through a breached side door. Outside, the ambient light had begun to fail, the clouds overhead thickening to a bruised purple. The wind remained a constant physical force. Should I continue or retreat while daylight lingered? Prudence urged departure, yet a strange compulsion anchored me, a feeling that the village itself demanded further witness. The echoes persisted, woven into the wind. Phantom conversations, fragments of laughter, whispers of chant, all seeming trapped within these crumbling confines. I turned into another alley, tightly hemmed by the looming back walls of houses. Broken tiles crunched underfoot, the high-pitched scrapes grating on my already frayed nerves. More photos. The camera beeped a low storage warning. Selection could wait. Around a corner, a small courtyard opened up, a derelict fountain at its center. The stone basin was chipped, dry, webbed with cracks, a monument to slow decay. Remnants of benches lined the perimeter, one shattered, another missing its seat entirely. I raised the camera to document this quiet tableau. Something metallic rattled behind me. I turned, scanning. A loose piece of guttering swung rhythmically from a roof edge, clanging against stone. Yet the tension in my shoulders remained, coiled tight. My pulse refused to settle. Abruptly, the wind died. An unnerving silence fell, amplifying the rasp of my own breathing. Then, with a clarity that raised the hair on my arms, the voices returned. Not murmurs this time, but a clear, multi-toned recitation of words I couldn't comprehend. Ancient prayers or ritual chants. A cold weight of dread settled deep in my gut. My eyes darted wildly, searching the courtyard, expecting figures to emerge from the deepening shadows. None appeared. Hand pressed to my chest, feeling the frantic bird of my heart, I considered fleeing. I took several steps towards the courtyard entrance, then faltered. Some internal mandate, curiosity, perhaps, or sheer obstinacy, insisted I capture more. Wiping sweat from my brow, chilled by the wind, yet flushed with adrenaline and fear, I walked towards the fountain, navigating the rubble. The wind returned with sudden violence, whipping dust into stinging vortices. Blinking rapidly, I framed the fountain, snapped the picture. The flash flared, illuminating the scene, and for a blinding fraction of a second, I saw it. A distinct silhouette near one of the broken benches. A figure standing. A gasp escaped me. I swung the flashlight beam towards the spot. The bench stood starkly empty. My heart leapt into my throat, pounding violently. Panting, I stared at the vacant space, the wind tugging insistently at my jacket. Had I imagined it? Conjured phantoms from dust and suggestion? Enough. The strain in my chest felt unbearable, threatening to rupture. Decision made. Leave the courtyard. Find the path out. I moved quickly, not quite running, but with undeniable purpose, my footsteps echoing on the cracked flagstones. Whenever the wind momentarily eased, I caught faint susurrations trailing behind me. Eyes fixed forward, I paused only once to confirm the camera's memory. Nearly full. Finally, the edge of the village, the crumbling stone step where my exploration began. I halted, turned, surveying the broken skyline of the ruins. The wind still sang its mournful, eerie song through them, carrying sounds that blurred the line between gale and ghostly whisper. My hands felt slick on the camera body. An ache radiated through my shoulders, born of sustained tension. My mouth was desert dry, the taste of dust clinging to my tongue. One final photograph, encompassing the desolate panorama. Then, the voice, again. My name, soft, borne on the breeze, yet unmistakable. Every nerve ending prickled. A primal urge to respond, to call out, warred with a paralyzing inability to form sound. My eyes burned, assaulted by grit and stress. Turning my back on the village, I started down the rocky incline. The wind pursued me, plucking at my clothes like spectral fingers. As I reached the hill's base, the gale seemed to relent slightly. One last glance over my shoulder. The ruins sat hunched and dark against the bruised sky. A profound chill settled in my chest. I inhaled, the stale air still coating my lips. Clutching the camera protectively, I replayed the fleeting shadows, the disembodied voices, the laughter that mocked decay, the unseen presence that had kept my heart racing. No answers, only a multitude of images, and my name echoing in the chambers of my memory. I reached my car, the familiar metal solidity a small comfort. My body screamed fatigue, thoughts fragmented and racing. Relief washed over me as I slid into the driver's seat. The sky bled into deeper shades of grey. The wind offered one final, prolonged howl as the engine turned over. Even within the car's enclosure, the feeling persisted. Something left unfinished, unresolved, but departure was non-negotiable. I drove, the rearview mirror reflecting the shrunken silhouette of the ruined village on the hill. Wind whistled past the windows, a constant reminder. My mind replayed the whispers, the chants, the moments my name had been plucked from the air. This story demanded telling, despite the utter lack of rational explanation. All I possessed was the testimony of my senses. Hitting the paved road felt like surfacing from a deep dive. My hands, I realized, were locked onto the steering wheel, knuckles white with strain. My heartbeat, though slowing, remained unnaturally fast for a long time. What that place was, what message it held, I couldn't fathom. I only knew the voices were real to my ears, the shadows real to my eyes. No living soul encountered, yet I had felt profoundly surrounded, observed, perhaps even addressed by something woven into the very fabric of the wind and stone. It felt as though the remnants of that place had reached out, demanding their story be carried away. I hadn't lingered for further clarification. One dose of its spectral atmosphere was sufficient. Yet the presence lingers still, a cold spot in memory, ready to resurface each time I revisit the chilling images captured in that windswept, haunted village. This impulse, agreeing to watch Leo's place, was sheer folly. That truth vibrates through me now. 3 a.m, cocooned in my car, outside the shell of his childhood home. The engine hums, a low thrum beneath the frantic pulse in my wrists. My fingers slick on the steering wheel. I have to anchor this experience in words, pin down every shadow and echo while the terror is still crystalline, before memory blurs the edges. Perhaps then, someone might grasp the sheer necessity of my flight. It began innocuously enough. 3 days passed. Leo's voice on the line, laced with that familiar, casual charm, asking a favor. His parents, decamped to sunnier climes, had left him the ancestral pile, unsold. A winter freeze had savaged the plumbing. Repairs were underway. Could I, adrift as I was between employments these last couple of months, occupy the space? A weak sanctuary in suburban quietude, free board, and compensation besides. It sounded like salvation, like easy currency. The house itself presented a facade of weary respectability. 2 floors of faded crimson brick, the white trim yearning for a painter's touch. Leo ushered me through its arteries upon arrival. Kitchen, salon, a trio of bedrooms slumbering upstairs. Standard anatomy. Until we stood before the basement portal, a heavy slab of painted wood. This, he declared, producing an antiquated brass key, remains inviolate. His tone shifted, shedding its lightness. Just storage detritus and the furnace, no call for exploration. He worked the deadbolt, a thick cylinder of modern steel, incongruous against the aged brass handle. Seriously, leave it sealed. A shrug was my reply. Basements are repositories of domestic history's clutter. Who courted such dust and gloom? The inaugural day unfolded with deceptive calm. plumbers arrived, wrestled with pipes, departed. I surrendered to neglected novels, the flicker of the television, the greasy comfort of delivered pizza, house-sitting by the numbers. But as twilight deepened into night, ascending the stairs toward slumber, I registered it, a muted percussion from behind the forbidden door, a soft, dull impact, as if something heavy had leaned or stumbled against the wood. I became utterly still, straining against the house's quiet hum. Silence answered, the groan of old timbers settling, surely. Morning light brought fragile rationality. Old structures breathe, exhale strange sighs. I dismissed the nocturnal thump. Yet around midday, standing in the kitchen's sterile brightness, I witnessed the door quiver. Not dramatically, just a subtle tremor, as though a hand on the unseen side had tested the knob with a tentative twist. The steel bolt held its ground. My call to Leo was couched in deliberate nonchalance. Odd query, Leo. Does that basement door exhibit spontaneous movement? Meaning what? His voice tightened, shedding its relaxed cadence. Uncertain. A faint rattling, perhaps? Atmospheric pressure, I suppose? Yes, pressure. That's likely it. Look, just don't concern yourself with it, all right? That lock serves a purpose. Keep it engaged. A prickle of unease urged me to probe further, but an indefinable tension in his voice acted as a deterrent. Nevertheless, the door became my unwilling focal point. Intermittently, every few hours, it would twitch, sometimes a mere vibration, other times a more distinct jiggle, a test and pull against the unyielding mechanism. The deadbolt remained impassive. The second night, the acoustics shifted. I was adrift in the blue light of a late-night film when the sound began overhead. Footsteps, measured, deliberate, traversing the upper floor. I silenced the television, the sudden quiet amplifying the noise. The tread was heavy, booted, moving methodically from one empty room to the next. My phone felt cold and vital in my palm, poised to dial emergency services. Then, the footfalls reached the stairwell's apex and began their descent. Each step groaned beneath an invisible burden. My heart became a frantic drum against my ribs. I was paralyzed. The steps reached the ground floor, paused, then resumed their trajectory, angling toward the basement door. Breath held captive in my lungs, I watched the empty air where the sound originated. The door remained shut. The phantom tread simply passed through it, the sound fading down into the subterranean dark. The remainder of the night was spent huddled on the sofa, every lamp in the house blazing defiance against the shadows. No further sound emerged from below. Dawn arrived, pale and uncertain. The urge to flee was a physical ache, yet my promise to Leo held me captive, alongside a desperate attempt at self-reassurance. Unsettling noises in an antiquated house. Was I succumbing to childish fear? The third day witnessed a terrifying crescendo. The door's agitation intensified, no longer tentative tremors, but sharp, violent yanks that rattled the entire frame. The spectral footsteps returned, but now they were relentless, pacing the unseen basement stairs for hours on end, sometimes rapid, frantic, sometimes slow and dragging, but always that same ponderous weight. I sought refuge in music, television, any distraction. It was futile. The sounds infiltrated everything, a persistent auditory violation. By evening, I was unraveling, sleep-deprived, every creak and sigh of the house triggering a jolt of adrenaline. And then, the fatal error. A desperate conviction bloomed. I had to know. One swift glance into the abyss below, just enough to confirm the mundane reality. Pipes, shadows, forgotten furniture, and dispel the phantoms. I retrieved the key from its hiding place atop the kitchen door frame, Leo's designated spot. My hand trembled violently as I approached the basement door. The pacing below had ceased. An unnerving, absolute silence descended. The key grated slightly as it entered the lock. A moment's hesitation, a precipice of indecision. Then I turned it. The deadbolt retracted with a resonant clack. I reached for the handle. Before my fingers made contact, something erupted against the other side of the door with explosive force. The impact sent me staggering backward. The door bucked in its frame as the assault continued, blow after furious blow, and through the shuddering wood seeped a sound, not precisely vocal, not merely a growl, but something inchoate, straining toward articulation. I scrambled away, fumbling frantically with the key, the relentless pounding echoing the frantic rhythm of my heart. As I finally jammed the key back into the lock and twisted, the handle began to rotate from the far side. I heard the metallic groan of the mechanism resisting, whatever entity resided below, battling the newly engaged bolt. The key felt fragile, threatening to shear off, but the lock held. The barrage persisted for another minute, a furious tattoo against the wood, then ceased with jarring abruptness. Into the ringing silence crept a new sound, weeping, soft, choked sobs muffled by the thickness of the door, emanating from the darkness beneath. They were disturbingly, terrifyingly, almost human. I retreated further, phone already clutched, Leo's number materializing on the screen. "What in God's name is in your basement?" The words tore from my throat the moment he answered. A protracted silence hummed across the line. "You unlocked the door, didn't you?" His voice was flat, devoid of surprise. "There's something alive down there." Leo exhaled, a sound heavy with years of resignation. "Listen to me. Exit the house, immediately. Don't collect your things. Don't pause. Just leave. I'll be there in 4 hours." "Not until you explain this." "Do you recall Daniel, my younger brother?" The name conjured a ghost from childhood. Daniel vanished without a trace decades ago. A cold case, a family tragedy. "What about him?" "He wasn't lost. He altered, began evolving into something other. My parents, they sought every remedy. Physicians, clergy, specialists. Nothing halted the progression. He grew more volatile, less recognizable. The basement, it was the only structure robust enough to contain him." My throat constricted. "That presence below, that's Daniel?" "A fragment, perhaps. What remains? We ceased knowing long ago. Just leave now, please." No further urging was required. I bolted, the front door left gaping in my wake. As my car lurched out of the driveway, a final, morbid compulsion made me glance back. Through the grimy pane of a low basement window, a flicker of motion. Something pallid pressed against the glass. A hand, glimpsed for only a second, yet seared into my memory. Digits impossibly elongated, bending at unnatural junctures, tipped with what looked like shards of bone. That was 20 minutes ago. I remained parked a mile distant, the world outside the car windows strangely muted, attempting to reconcile the mundane dawn with the monstrous revelation. My phone buzzes intermittently. Leo, undoubtedly, but the words refuse to form. How does one process such inherited horror? How does one erase the image of that hand? My thoughts circle relentlessly around Daniel, the boy imprisoned in subterranean darkness for 2 decades, warping into the entity I heard raging behind that door. Was any vestige of humanity left weeping in the aftermath? Sunrise bleeds across the horizon. Leo will arrive soon, demanding an account, the precise texture of the sounds, the shape of the shadows. I will recount what I've inscribed here, this frantic testimony. But return to that house? Never. Some thresholds are sealed for profound reasons. In the quiet neighborhood behind me, a dog erupts in frantic barking, triggering another nearby. A distant car alarm shrieks. My eyes dart to the rearview mirror, a primal instinct scanning the pre-dawn gloom for pursuit. Nothing stirs, just an empty street, slowly surrendering its shadows to the encroaching light. I engage the transmission. Distance is the only imperative now. Yet, as the miles accumulate, one final, chilling detail resonates, a discordant note in the symphony of fear. The basement door possessed a deadbolt on both sides, not merely to deny entry, but to ensure containment. At 13 minutes shy of 3 on a Tuesday morning, the passenger seat sensor bloomed into life. A glance in the rear view, a flick of my eyes to the right, nothing but worn upholstery. Yet the dashboard display remained stubbornly lit, announcing an occupant of precisely 143 pounds. I navigate the nocturnal veins of downtown Chicago for rideshare platforms. 8 years baptize you in the city's chaos. Soused undergrads, sparring lovers, souls fragmenting under pressure. This, however, felt alien. The app displayed a pickup request. Lillian Croft, 1894. Attempting to access her profile yielded only an error. User not found. It began on Michigan Avenue, shadowed by the venerable water tower. A cold October drizzle was falling, the kind that seeps into your marrow. Having just discharged my final fare, I was contemplating retreat when the new summons materialized. A near-perfect 4.97 rating shimmered on the screen. The pickup point coincided exactly with my parked location. For 5 minutes, I waited, engine thrumming softly, wipers skittering across the glass. No one appeared. Just as I reached to cancel, the sensor ignited. Initially, I surmised a malfunction. These vehicles endure relentless use. Components inevitably fail. I reached across, pressed down on the passenger seat. The cushion yielded, compressing as if under genuine weight. When I withdrew my hand, the indentation lingered for several heartbeats before slowly resurfacing. Hello? The word felt absurd, addressed to empty air. The cabin temperature plummeted by what felt like 10 degrees. My own breath misted before my face. I fumbled for my phone to abort the ride, but the application resisted. Each tap on Cancel Ride merely refreshed the screen, snapping back to the active trip. Navigation was already engaged, plotting a course toward an address in Lincoln Park. This was the juncture where prudence dictates abandoning the vehicle and the night. But alimony looms, and tuition waits for no one. The fare was non-negotiable, and, admittedly, a morbid curiosity gnawed. 8 years behind the wheel, and nothing had prepared me for this. Shifting into drive, I eased away from the curb. The seat sensor remained illuminated, its tiny icon gleaming on my dash like a miniature indictment. Every few blocks, I'd risk a look sideways. Nothing but vacant space, imprinted by an unseen 143-pound burden. The navigation guided me northward along Lakeshore Drive. At 3 a.m., the road was a desolate ribbon. To my right, the lake lay swallowed by darkness, though I could hear the waves thundering against the breakwater. The rain intensified, hammering a rhythm on the roof. The chill deepened. I blasted the furnace, but it offered little solace. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I blamed the cold. The radio began hissing with static. Attempts to find a clear station merely scanned through waves of white noise. We veered off Lake Shore onto Fullerton. Here the streets were tenebrous, tree limbs drooping low, ancient brownstones brooding on either flank. The navigation indicated arrival before a 3-story Victorian that appeared untouched since the fin de siècle. Utterly dark, its paint peeled like sunburnt skin, windows boarded, dead vines clawing its facade. A no trespassing sign hung askew on the wrought iron fence. My phone insisted, destination reached. End ride? I queried the silence. Nothing. The sensor light persisted. Later, property records confirmed the house derelict since 1894, following a fire that claimed its owner, Lillian Croft, aged 27. The front door of the house groaned ajar. No illumination within, only absolute blackness. Abruptly, the seat sensor extinguished. The car's climate instantly stabilized. I remained parked for a long while, engine humming, wipers still sweeping. Finally, I mustered the courage to check the back seat. Empty. But upon the passenger seat, where the pressure had been, I discovered a single pearl button, ancient and sallow, the type sewn onto bridal gowns in the 1890s. I made a beeline home and reported myself indisposed the following day. Hours were lost researching the house, Lillian Croft. I unearthed an old newspaper article detailing the fire. Her body was never recovered from the debris. The report noted she was last observed entering a carriage late at night, clad in her wedding dress. She was due to be weighed the next morning. That transpired 3 weeks ago. I'm driving again, though I steer clear of Lincoln Park after dark. Occasionally, during rain, my passenger seat sensor still stutters. The pearl button resides in my glove compartment. Why I retained it, I couldn't say. Perhaps as testament to myself that the event wasn't imagined. Last night, another request surfaced. A different name, yet the same error message obstructed profile viewing. The pickup point, the water tower, once more. I killed the request instantly and signed off. Some fares don't justify the psychic toll. My thoughts kept circling back to that empty seat, the weight exerting pressure. 143 pounds of an unseen burden. 8 years driving Chicago nights. I imagined I was seasoned. I was mistaken. The next day, deeper library dives yielded more on Lillian Croft. Not merely a fire victim. Her fiancé had been scrutinized regarding her disappearance, but never charged. Bloodstains were found in his carriage. No body. The prevailing theory then, he murdered her, using the blaze as a smokescreen. The Fullerton house wasn't hers. It belonged to the fiancé. The fire originated in the basement, where investigators later found evidence suggesting captivity, chains bolted to masonry, frantic scratches gouged into wooden supports. The fiancé maintained he was out of town, a perfect alibi. A week after my encounter, I cruised by the address in daylight. An empty plot. City records showed the Victorian raised in 1975, but I trust my senses regarding that night. I've begun noticing patterns since. The seat sensor comes alive more frequently now, typically late when I'm alone. The temperature descends, the radio dissolves into static, but the mass is variable. Adingdron 60 pounds, 118, 175, shifting origins, different destination addresses, invariably pointing to structures that exist only in memory. Last night, my passenger was a historian from the Chicago Historical Society. Mid-ride, I broached the subject of 1890s disappearances. Her eyes lit up. It was her precise area of research. Dozens of young women, she explained, vanished during that decade. All last seen entering carriages at night. None ever found. The passenger sensor has just illuminated again. 136 pounds this time. The app shows a pickup for Beatrice Shaw, 1891. Outside, a drizzle has commenced. The temperature is descending. My phone's navigation is actively charting a route to an address in the old Stockyards district. Logic dictates logging out, driving home, dismissing all of this. Yet I think of those women, decades spent seeking resolution, yearning for discovery. Perhaps that's their perpetual state, searching for someone to help articulate their stories. The sensor remains lit. The weight registers a subtle adjustment, as if someone is settling. Through the radio static, I can almost discern a whisper. The navigation screen is poised. I engage the transmission. Some fares you must accept, regardless of the destination. As I glide from the curb, I cast my eyes toward the passenger seat again. Still empty, but now I perceive something previously overlooked. Minuscule water droplets materializing on the leather, resembling teardrops shed by invisible eyes. The dashboard clock displays 2:47 a.m. Behind me, the city lies dormant. Before me, the streets are shadowed and vacant, bound for a place I approach with trepidation. But I press onward, because maybe, just maybe, these women require more than transport. Maybe they need someone to bear witness, to validate what befell them, to affirm their existence, that they held significance, that they linger in memory. The navigation instructs a turn left, further into the bowels of the industrial district. Derelict manufactories from a bygone era jut on either side. The rain is intensifying. The radio static has coalesced into something that might be speech, perhaps lamentation. I consult the clock once more. 3:33 a.m. The passenger seat sensor shows the weight has adjusted to 139 pounds. Through the static, I perceive the echo of a woman's voice pleading, "Please." The navigation indicates we're approaching the terminus. Ahead, an old warehouse materializes. According to the map, this is it. But a dissonance strikes me. The building appears pristine, revitalized, as it might have stood in 1891. Through the rain-streaked windshield, I can see illumination within, activity in the windows. The seat sensor goes dark. The temperature normalizes. The radio falls silent. On the passenger seat rests another pearl button and an additional item, a small piece of paper, brittle with time. A fragment of newsprint, previously unknown to me. Beatrice Shaw, 19, vanished. Last seen entering warehouse district late Tuesday night. Reward offered for information. I remain parked for a long time, engine humming, wipers sweeping aside the rain. Finally, I extend my hand and retrieve the button and the clipping, consigning them to my burgeoning archive in the glove compartment. Relics of things that defy explanation. Proof that some stories persist beyond conclusion. The navigation has faded. The warehouse ahead resumes its derelict appearance, crumbling. But I know now, within those decaying walls lie truths, submerged beneath decades of silence. I should depart, go home, forget, but I recognize the futility, because tomorrow night or the next, a fresh summons will emerge on my app. A new pressure will manifest in that passenger seat. Another narrative clamoring for an audience. For now, I shift into reverse, back toward familiar asphalt, the mundane sphere of corporeal fares and rational endpoints. But I safeguard the pearl buttons, retain the newspaper clippings, remain vigilant each time the seat sensor awakens. Because in this city, some fares lack substance, certain journeys defy closure, and sometimes the most significant passages are those that never register in the system at all. The rain is abating as I head home, but this is far from concluded. Somewhere out there, other souls linger, further narratives demand telling. And every night around 2:47 a.m., that passenger seat sensor may flare anew. I'll continue my rounds, maintain my watch, continue assembling those pearl buttons and fragments of newsprint. Because perhaps they selected me for this, more than a mere chauffeur, an archivist, someone to validate their past, affirm they possessed worth, ensure they endure. The city streets are deserted for now, but I perceive the unseen. Invisible patrons travel these lanes. Certain trips echo eternally, and sometimes the most profound arrivals point to destinations that are mere phantoms on the map. I consult the looking glass one last time before turning onto my street. For an instant, I fancy I glimpse a form, a woman in period attire, pearl buttons shining faintly in the gloom. But a second inspection reveals the rear bench is vacant. Come the next dusk, I'll be patrolling again, anticipating the sensor's glow, expecting another spectral summons that eludes the digital ledger, poised to uncover what truly happened to these women, journey by spectral journey. Because in this city, not every phantom intends fright. Some merely seek passage homeward. Some yearn for their chronicle to unfold, and some just crave remembrance. The passenger seat sensor has pulsed once more. The night shift beckons. The nocturne of the woods possesses its own peculiar acoustics, sounds you dissect differently under the cloak of night. I'd long counted myself among those at ease in nature's solitary embrace, a veteran of countless trails and tent sites since boyhood. Yet that particular night, tracing a path trod only once before, equilibrium deserted me. It wasn't merely the familiar discourse of unseen fauna. A deeper resonance stirred, the unnerving sense of the wilderness itself holding its breath, listening back. Earlier that afternoon, I had diverged from the well-worn artery of the main trail, surrendering to the allure of a seldom-used capillary described in an old trail guide. Its promise, a secluded overlook, leagues removed from the common grounds, a sanctuary for quiet contemplation. This was the communion I craved, immersion in the planet's untamed murmur, unburdened by human static. My destination remained my secret, a spontaneous pilgrimage into deeper solitude. What, after all, was there to fear in such profound peace? The path, a mere suggestion swallowed by encroaching arboreal giants, constricted passage. Sunlight fractured through the dense overhead latticework, painting the forest floor in premature twilight. With each step deeper, the world hushed, the ambient noise floor dropping until only the percussion of my own boots on leaf litter and the occasional startled flutter in the undergrowth remained. An hour melted away before a modest clearing presented itself, an adequate stage for my overnight stay. Prudence urged pitching the shelter before darkness claimed the woods entirely. As the sun bled color along the western horizon, I coaxed a small fire to life, its flames a flickering bulwark against the encroaching shadows. Sustenance taken, I settled into the deepening gloaming. The woods exhaled a fragile tranquility, the sibilance of wind through the high pines, the fire's companionable crackle, the distant, mournful query of an owl. But as true night descended, an impenetrable ink washing over the landscape, a subtle dissonance crept in, an ambient pressure, the psychic weight of unseen observation. I dismissed it initially, a phantom conjured by isolation, yet the sensation clung, tenacious. Every glance towards the tree line met an imagined gaze from the impenetrable black. Focus on the fire, I told myself, on the familiar woodland sounds. But the unease, a cold subterranean spring, only seeped deeper. Eventually, hoping the thin nylon walls might offer sanctuary, I resolved to retire. The fire dwindled to embers, the tent zipper rasped shut, and I burrowed into my sleeping bag. Scarcely had my eyes closed when the sound began. A faint, insistent tap, rhythmic, delicate. I sat bolt upright, pulse leaping, straining against the silence. It was soft, almost subliminal, like knuckles rapping gently on distant timber. Holding my breath, I pinpointed its origin, the clearing's edge, just beyond the fabric boundary of my world. Tap, tap, tap. No beast moved with such measured cadence. Nothing born of wind or wood alone possessed that deliberate, patient quality. My hand closed around the cool metal of the flashlight. The zipper yielded with a tearing sound, and the beam sliced into the absolute dark. It illuminated only a chaotic tapestry of leaves and limbs, and the tapping ceased. Utter silence descended, thick and watchful. I waited, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, listening. Only the sigh of a breeze through the canopy answered. A branch, perhaps? A woodpecker working late? Rationalizations felt thin, inadequate. Retreating into the tent, I sealed the opening, striving for calm, for the steadying rhythm of breath. No sooner had I settled again, eyes clenched shut, than the tapping resumed. Closer now, louder. Tap, tap, tap. A cold rigidity seized me, every muscle tensed. My mind, a trapped bird, beat against the cage of my skull. Look again, invite whatever waited into the fragile circle of light, or remain here, a passive audience to its encroaching presence. The paralysis broke. Inaction was unbearable. Flashlight gripped tight. I burst from the tent, sweeping the beam in a frantic arc. Again, the tapping instantly vanished. The woods fell utterly mute, as if holding its collective breath. My own breath soared in my throat, hands trembling as I scanned the impassive trees, the depthless shadows. Nothing, only emptiness, amplified by the sudden quiet. I backed into the shelter, securing the zipper like a vault door. Breathe. It's nothing, just the woods playing tricks. But the conviction of being not alone was absolute, a certainty lodged deep beneath my ribs. I lay taut, senses stretched to their limit, every rustle magnified, every nocturnal sigh pregnant with meaning. My own frantic heartbeat filled the void. The tapping, however, did not return. Hours crawled by in this state of hypervigilant stillness, waiting. Then, just as a precarious semblance of calm began to settle, a new sound emerged, intimate and horrifying, a soft, dry scraping against the tent fabric, mere inches away. My breath hitched. I turned to stone. It was a slow, exploratory rasp, the distinct texture of something dragging, deliberately, across the taut nylon. It wasn't frantic like an animal scrabbling. It was measured, inquisitive. The sound migrated along the tent wall, a chilling circumnavigation. My mind recoiled. No creature of the woods moved thus, tested a barrier with such unnerving finesse. This felt sentient, purposeful. My fingers, slick with sweat, spasmed around the flashlight. A scream built, a physical pressure in my chest, but fear clamped down, stealing voice and motion. The scraping paused, silence returned, but heavier now, suffocating. And then, slicing through the stillness, a whisper, so faint it was almost imagined, yet utterly distinct. "Come out!" Ice water flooded my veins. The voice, thin and dry as autumn leaves, seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere. "Come out." I remained utterly still, breath trapped, every primal instinct shrieking, "Stay hidden, stay silent." But the whisper persisted, soft, insidious, a dreadful siren's call, drawing me towards the unseen. I offered no response, made no movement, my gaze locked on the zipper's metallic teeth. My heart felt dangerously overlarge, threatening to crack my ribs. My breathing, shallow and rapid. Then, as abruptly as it began, the voice fell silent. The profound quiet of the deep woods rushed back in, leaving only the echo of that chilling invitation and the frantic thrumming in my ears. I waited, coiled tight, listening for the slightest disturbance, the faintest sign of continued presence. There was only the vast, indifferent silence of the night. Sleep was an impossibility. I sat rigid, flashlight a useless talisman clutched in my fist, eyes fixed on the tent flap, anticipating something. The long hours until dawn were an eternity spent balanced on a knife edge of terror. Finally, the first tentative fingers of grey light probed the forest canopy. Stiff, trembling, hollowed out by fear and sleeplessness, I emerged. With frantic, clumsy haste, I broke camp, stuffing gear haphazardly into my pack, my gaze constantly darting towards the silent, watching trees. No food, no pause for rest, just the desperate imperative to flee. Down the overgrown trail, I stumbled, legs unsteady, heart still galloping, glancing repeatedly over my shoulder. The woods remained unnervingly still, observant, withholding judgment as I retreated. Reaching the car felt like breaching the surface after near drowning. Pack flung into the trunk, I slammed the door, turned the key. The engine roared to life, a sound of blessed normalcy. I didn't look back, offered no final glance towards the trailhead's shadowed maw. I simply drove, eyes glued to the asphalt ribbon unwinding before me, the memory of that whisper, a cold, permanent resident in my mind. What shared the woods with me that night? I possess no name for it, no explanation, but its voice carved one truth into my marrow. The deepest solitude is not always empty, and I will never again seek it alone. From the instant I crossed the threshold into that ostentatious edifice, a dissonance hummed beneath the surface, though I couldn't fathom that a mere evening of minding a child would unravel into a tapestry woven with sheer, heart-stopping dread. It presented itself as simplicity itself. The Sterlings were pillars of our circumscribed town, affluent, esteemed, perpetually seeking a trustworthy presence for their 5-year-old son, Leo. When Mrs. Sterling's call came that afternoon, her voice edged with a near-pleading urgency to replace their indisposed regular sitter. Refusal felt impossible. The allure of doubled compensation certainly didn't dissuade me. I arrived as twilight bled across the meticulously sculpted lawn, drawing long, skeletal fingers of shadow. Mr. Sterling, immaculate in tuxedo attire destined for some charity gala, swung the heavy door inward. "Clara, thank heavens," he breathed, guiding me into the cavernous foyer, a cold expanse of marble and polished timber. My jeans and simple sweater felt utterly inadequate. Mrs. Sterling descended the grand staircase, the sharp click of her heels, doubtless worth more than my aged vehicle, echoing in the vast space. "Leo's already down for the night," she announced, perfecting her lipstick's crimson arc. "He shouldn't stir, but his room's location is familiar if necessity arises." I offered a nod, having watched Leo previously, yet an indefinable tremor in her voice gave me pause. Anxiety flickered behind her smoothed, immobile features. "Just one additional item," Mr. Sterling interjected, steering me toward a gleaming tablet embedded in the living room wall. "We've enhanced our security measures. Full camera monitoring is accessible from here." My eyes widened. Cameras, a new, unsettling addition. A laugh escaped Mrs. Sterling, high-pitched and fragile. "Ah, the modern age, you understand. One can never exercise too much caution. Simply maintain a watchful eye, won't you? Knowing you're observing provides immense comfort." Before further inquiry could form on my lips, they vanished in a cloud of costly fragrance and last-minute directives. Silence descended, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the low thrum of sophisticated electronics. I drifted toward the kitchen, retrieving a cold drink from the stainless steel monolith of a refrigerator. The tablet beckoned, its screen fractured into a grid displaying silent, monochrome views: the darkened backyard, the empty drive, the upper corridor. One square held my attention: Leo's room, the boy adrift in sleep within his fantastical race car bed. A peculiar unease coiled within me at the act of observing him thus. It felt intrusive, fundamentally wrong. Just as I prepared to avert my gaze, a flicker of movement snagged the corner of the display. A jolt, sharp and sudden, shot through me. Leaning closer, I peered intently at the grainy night vision feed. There it manifested again. An amorphous darkness skirting the frame's lower edge, perhaps merely an illusion, a phantom conjured by light and shadow. Yet, as I remained transfixed, the shape appeared to coalesce, elongating across the floorboards, creeping inexorably toward Leo's slumbering form. I launched myself up the staircase, devouring the steps 2 at a time. Perspiration slicked my palm as I reached for the knob to Leo's room, turning it with painstaking slowness. The chamber swam in the gentle luminescence of a nightlight. Leo lay undisturbed, his small chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm of deep sleep. My gaze swept the room, straining against the gloom. Nothing amiss, nothing tangible. A wave of foolishness washed over me as I retreated downstairs. My own overwrought imagination surely stoked by the strangeness of monitoring screens in a house I thought I knew. Sinking into the opulent embrace of the sofa, I summoned my phone, seeking refuge in the mindless scroll of digital feeds. An hour drifted by, placid and uneventful. I checked on Leo again, physically this time, confirming his continued peaceful repose. Returning downstairs, however, motion on an exterior camera feed arrested my attention. A silhouette traversed the rear patio, hugging the deepest shadows. My pulse leaped. Could it be the Sterlings, returned prematurely? Improbable. This figure moved with a stealthy, deliberate purpose, clad entirely in black. My fingers scrabbled for my phone, poised to dial emergency services, when the figure pivoted, staring directly into the camera lens. Ice water sluiced down my spine. A mask concealed their face, blank, white, a featureless horror plucked from nightmare. The masked individual lifted a hand, index finger extended, pointing unequivocally at the camera. Then, with agonizing deliberation, they drew that finger across their throat. The screen blinked into oblivion. Panic detonated within my chest. I stabbed frantically at the unresponsive tablet, desperate to resurrect the visual feed, but the system remained inert, utterly defunct. A distinct creak emanated from the floor above, freezing me in place. Straining my hearing, I isolated the undeniable cadence of footsteps. Far too heavy, too deliberate to belong to Leo. My thoughts fragmented, racing. Reach Leo, escape the house. But the intruder, were they already upstairs? Were there more? Toward the staircase I crept, the frantic drumming of my heart a betraying thunder in my ears. The house itself seemed to hold its breath, shadows deepening, every alcove a potential concealment for unseen menace. Halfway up, a door swung open above. Leo's frightened query drifted down the hall. "Hello, Mommy?" "Leo!" Abandoning all pretense of stealth, I surged upward, rounding the corner into the upper hallway. His door stood ajar, spilling light into the surrounding darkness. Leo stood there, clad in pajamas, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Clara, I had a scary dream." Relief, potent and overwhelming, flooded me. I swept him into my arms, holding him tight. "It's all right, little one. We need to go downstairs now, all right? Very, very quietly." He mumbled assent against my shoulder, still submerged in drowsiness. I turned, aiming for the stairs, and stopped dead. Poised at the hallway's far end, utterly still, stood the masked figure. Sensing the shift in me, the raw terror, Leo began to whimper. I clutched him tighter, mind frantically seeking an escape route. The stairs were blocked, the only remaining egress. I spun and bolted for the master suite. Its balcony offered a chance, a call for help, perhaps even a desperate descent. The heavy door slammed shut behind us. My trembling fingers fumbled with the lock, a flimsy barrier destined to fail, but perhaps it would purchase moments. Setting Leo down, I rushed to the French doors leading onto the balcony. Locked. No, please, I whispered, rattling the handle in futile desperation. Through the glass, neighboring houses glowed with warm, oblivious light, achingly close, yet impossibly distant. A heavy thud resonated against the bedroom door, making me flinch. Leo's whimpers escalated into full-blown crying. Scooping him up again, my eyes darted wildly, searching for any object, any potential weapon. The impacts intensified, the door shuddering violently within its frame. It wouldn't withstand much more. Retreating against the balcony doors, I shielded Leo with my body, my free hand closing around the substantial weight of a crystal vase on a nearby table. Pathetic, yet it was all I possessed. With a splintering crack, the door imploded inward. The masked figure occupied the threshold, silhouetted against the hallway's illumination. A wickedly sharp knife gleamed in their grasp, catching the light as they advanced into the room. "Please," I begged, my voice fracturing. "Don't hurt him. Take anything you desire. Just allow us to leave." The figure tilted its head in silent contemplation. Then, stunningly, unbelievably, they reached up and stripped away the mask. Mrs. Sterling. Mrs. Sterling?" I stammered, my brain struggling to reconcile the image. "What is happening?" She smiled, but the expression bore no resemblance to the polished socialite I knew. This was feral, utterly unhinged. "Oh, Clara," she purred, her voice laden with a sickeningly false sweetness. "You performed admirably, exceeded our expectations truly." "Mommy," Leo whimpered, burrowing his face into the curve of my neck. "What are you saying?" I demanded, reeling from the cognitive dissonance. "Why are you doing this?" Her laughter, sharp and brittle, cut through the air. "It's elementary, my dear. A necessary evaluation of our new security apparatus. And what superior method exists than a simulated home invasion?" She gestured with the knife toward the ravaged doorway. "Richard, darling, you may reveal yourself now. Our little test subject has endured sufficient fright, I believe." Mr. Sterling materialized beside his wife, a veneer of sheepishness failing to conceal an underlying menace. "You must appreciate, Clara," he began, his tone infuriatingly rational. "Our position necessitates absolute certainty regarding our family's protection, confirmation of the system's efficacy, and indeed, our sitter's response under duress was imperative." I stared, aghast, mouth agape. This was all a test? Have you any conception of the terror I felt? Of how frightened Leo is?" Mrs. Sterling waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, he shall recover. Children possess remarkable resilience, and you, my dear, passed with distinction. We shall naturally double your compensation henceforth. Peace of mind, after all, is beyond price." My gaze fell to Leo, still trembling against me, soft sniffles escaping him, then lifted back to his parents, standing so casually amidst the wreckage of their orchestrated nightmare. In that instant, something fractured within me. "Retain your money," I spat, gently setting Leo down. "I resign." And the moment I am clear of this property, I am contacting the authorities and Child Protective Services. What you perpetrated, it transcends mere wrongness. It is criminal. Their smug certainty wavered. Mr. Sterling stepped forward, hands raised in a placating gesture. Now, Clara, let us avoid rash decisions. This can be resolved. Evading them both, I scooped Leo back into my arms and moved toward the ruined doorway. Do not approach me, I warned, astonished by the newfound steel reinforcing my voice. We are leaving, immediately. They offered no resistance as I navigated the wreckage, descended the stairs, and pushed through the front door into the cool night air. The instant my feet touched the driveway, my shaking hands retrieved my phone and dialed 911. Perched on the curb, cradling a quietly weeping Leo, I watched as patrol cars and an ambulance converged, their emergency lights bathing the Sterling mansion's flawless facade in strobing, accusatory reds and blues. I recounted the night's events in a haze, the reality still struggling to fully penetrate my shock. As officers escorted Mr. and Mrs. Sterling toward the waiting vehicles, Mrs. Sterling's eyes met mine. The mask of civility was firmly back in place, yet now I perceived the hairline fissures beneath, the darkness pulsing just under the surface. I hugged Leo closer, making a silent, fierce vow to ensure his safety, his true safety, from this moment forward. The evening commenced as a simple caretaking assignment, yet it had metamorphosed into something far more profound, a brutal lesson that true monstrosities sometimes dwell in mansions, draped in designer labels. As the police cruisers receded into the night, I understood that my life, and Leo's, had been irrevocably altered, but we had endured. Confronted by manufactured terror, we had unearthed a resilience previously unknown. Whatever lay ahead, we would confront it side by side. The memory clings, sharp as salt spray, the moment my utility truck crunched to a halt before the brooding edifice. I emerged, confronted by the stone sentinel poised dramatically on the cliff's precipice, the Atlantic wind a raw slap against my cheek. Its windows, vacant sockets staring seaward, its great doors, sealed like lips guarding a secret. A palpable sense of expectation emanated from the structure, a silent dare to approach. I lingered, absorbing the desolation, the fractured flagstones of the path, the paint flaking from the walls like sunburnt skin. My directive was simple, stark: resurrect an antique piano, mute for uncounted years. As Elias, a tuner by trade, silence is my usual medium, yet the quietude clinging to this place felt denser, somehow malignant. I pushed against the heavy front door. It groaned open on protesting hinges. My tread echoed unnervingly down the cavernous hallway, the air thick with the must of disuse. Dropping my tool satchel onto the dust-filmed floor, my gaze swept the foyer. A grand staircase spiraled upwards. Flanking it were imposing doors promising forgotten rooms. Ancestral portraits, obscured by grime and time, hung within tarnished frames, their gazes ignored. My focus remained tethered to the task. I possessed a name, a number, the agent to call should I finish ahead of schedule. Decades, he'd said, since anyone resided here, but the owners, eyeing a sale, desired the piano functional, a potential lure for buyers. The instrument awaited me in a vast chamber at the hallway's terminus. Windows framed the restless sea, waves shattering against the jagged rocks far below. Draped in a heavy shroud, the piano occupied a corner, a dark bulk against the salt-bleached light. Scratches marred its wooden flanks, yet peering inside, the strings appeared surprisingly sound. A swift assessment followed, keys ivory-hued with age, hammers bearing witness to past performances, though I'd certainly encountered worse. I depressed a triad of keys, anticipating a discordant jangle, a muffled thud. Anything, nothing. Utter silence, as if the keys yielded against soundless felt. No resonance, no lingering vibration. I rapped the casework with my knuckles. A solid thump answered, dispelling fears of rot or hollowness. The sustain pedal moved with smooth fluidity. With greater determination, I struck a full chord. Still, only a profound absence of sound. It was then that the first tendrils of genuine disquiet curled within me. The piano presented every hallmark of functionality. No discernible physical impediment could account for this acoustic void. Unpacking my implements, I began the methodical ritual, adjusting tuning pins, testing the intricate action, inspecting the hammer felts. Note by methodical note, I traversed the keyboard, lowest C to highest, my ear straining for the faintest tonal variation it was trained to perceive. Only that same baffling stillness rewarded my efforts. I nudged the hammers. They responded with the expected looseness, yet their impact on the strings produced no audible result. My flashlight beam probed every recess, searching for obstructions, moisture damage, anything amiss. Nothing. Leaning back, I rubbed tired eyes. I, Elias, had coaxed music from instruments ravaged by neglect, flood, and fire, but never had I faced a piano that looked whole yet refused, absolutely, to speak. Returning to the truck, I retrieved more specialized gear, adding a small digital recorder on impulse. Perhaps subsonic frequencies, inaudible to me, were being generated. Near the piano, I initiated the recording, pressed the keys once more. Silence persisted. After a minute, I stopped and listened to the playback. Only the sibilance of my own breath and the distant, melancholy sigh of the ocean. Nothing more. The urge to call the agent, to confess defeat, warred with professional pride. There had to be a hidden fracture, a disconnected linkage I'd overlooked. Raising the heavy lid, I scrutinized the harp. Dusty, yes, but intact. The pins held firm, each wire stretched taut. I depressed a key, watching the hammer arc cleanly strike the corresponding string. Watched it connect. The string should have sung, vibrated. It remained utterly inert, as if the very physics of sound had been selectively suspended within this single object. A clammy dampness slicked my palms. Hours bled together in that room, a cycle of probing, testing, listening to the void. The sun dipped below the horizon, extinguishing the natural light, leaving the chamber illuminated solely by the portable lamp I'd fetched from the foyer. Beyond its circle of light, the house sank into absolute blackness. Outside, the wind moaned around the eaves, punctuated by the groaning protests of ancient timbers. At some point, I rose, stretching cramped muscles, rotating stiff shoulders. A flicker of movement snagged my peripheral vision. I spun, heart hammering. Nothing but the piano, impassive in the dim light. A nervous chuckle escaped me. Fatigue playing tricks. Focus, Elias. Focus. Perhaps gathering my tools, finding a bedroom, seeking a few hours' respite. Then I heard it, a brief jarring cluster of notes from behind me, a dissonant, almost accidental-sounding chord. My breath hitched. I whirled, flashlight beam spearing the piano. The keys were perfectly still. No visible tremor, no sign of recent depression. Swallowing hard against a suddenly dry throat, I stepped closer. Everything appeared unchanged. Had the wind found a freak passage? A draft stirring the strings? Impossible. No chimney here. No perceptible air current. Setting up the recorder again, just in case, I pressed the record button, approached the instrument, played a few keys. Silence. Turning my back deliberately, I stood motionless, listening intently. Only the wind's lament and the house's creaking symphony reached my ears. After a minute or two, I replayed the recording. My breathing, faint static, nothing else. I switched off the device, the frantic pulse in my ears drowning the silence. That chord had been undeniably real. With a decisive click, I lowered the fallboard, concealing the keys. Sleep. I needed sleep. Collecting my tools, I quit the room. Upstairs, I located a bedroom. Dust lay thick upon the bed, but the frame seemed solid. Brushing it down as best I could, I unrolled my sleeping bag atop the mattress, setting my phone alarm for the cusp of dawn. Perhaps daylight would alter the piano's obstinate silence. I awoke stiff, a residue of unease clinging to me. The alarm shrilled into the pre-dawn gloom. 6 a.m. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I saw the first hints of sunrise painting the ocean horizon. The house was utterly still as I descended the stairs. Back in the main room, the lamp I'd left burning was now extinguished. Odd. I flicked the switch. It sprang back to life. Had I turned it off? My memory was a blur. Approaching the piano, I stopped short. The fallboard was raised. I was certain I had closed it. Peering closer at the keys, I saw them. Distinct smudges, fingerprints, several sets, as if left by hands coated in dust or grease. A fresh wave of sweat broke out on my palms. I scanned the dusty floor. Only my own footprints were visible. Pulling out my phone, I captured an image, my hand trembling slightly. The camera recorded the smudges clearly. Tentatively, I touched a key. Still silent. I procured a clean cloth, meticulously wiped the prints away. Tried the keys again. Nothing. It was 6:30 a.m. A hollow pang in my stomach reminded me of sustenance. The kitchen yielded little beyond stale air and empty cupboards. I sipped lukewarm water from the jug I'd brought before returning, inevitably, to the piano room. The sensation of being watched intensified, a prickling awareness on the back of my neck, though the room remained empty. Mid-morning, an idea struck. I positioned my phone on a small tripod, aimed squarely at the piano, and started a video recording. I made a point of walking noisily down the creaking hallway, positioning myself out of sight, but within earshot. 10 minutes crawled by. Faint clicking sounds reached me. The house settling, or something else? Then unmistakable. A brief cascade of notes, jumbled, discordant. It lasted perhaps 5 seconds. My breathing grew shallow. After a pause, I walked back into the room. The piano sat undisturbed. I stopped the recording, played it back. The video showed the static scene, my footsteps echoing, the faint rustle of my jacket, but the bizarre notes, absent, utterly gone from the recording. I replayed the segment repeatedly. Silence. On screen, the keys remained immobile, yet I knew what I had heard. I stood transfixed, staring at the instrument. A chill traced its way up my spine, My mouth felt like parchment. Closer now, I examined the keys again. New smudges had appeared. Where I had wiped clean, more ghostly prints now resided. Wiping them again, I pressed the keys. Silence. Lifting the lid, I checked the hammers, the mechanism, all in order. My hands shook as I drew out my tools, tightening a pin here, lightly tapping a string there with a tuning hammer. A faint metallic ping resulted from direct impact, proving the strings weren't physically deadened. They responded to force. Yet press a key, engage the mechanism as designed, and the result was invariable silence. I lost count of the repetitions. Standing abruptly, I turned, took a single step away. Behind me, a wavering note materialized, thin and unsteady, trailing off into something akin to a low moan. It vanished in less than a second. My throat constricted. I spun back, lunging towards the piano, flipping the lid open, desperate to catch the hammers or strings in motion. Motionless, still, sweat beaded on my forehead. Enough. I needed air, perspective. Outside, I climbed into my truck, turned the ignition. The engine's rumble felt blessedly normal. Should I just drive away? Part of me screamed yes. Another, the ingrained professional, felt the weight of the unfinished job. But this transcended mechanics. This felt other. Killing the engine, I stepped back inside. I would see this through, at least until I could offer the agent a coherent, albeit bizarre, explanation. Evening deepened, bringing a more profound darkness, a keener chill. The wind howled with renewed ferocity. I forced down a couple of energy bars, drank more water. Tonight, I decided, I would stay in the piano room itself. I brought down my sleeping bag, set up the phone to record again, plugged into a portable charger this time. Flashlight within reach. Hours drifted. I hovered in the liminal space between waking and sleep when a distorted chord ripped through the quiet, jolting me fully awake. Scrambling upright, I snatched the flashlight, its beam finding the piano. Keys were depressed, seemingly at random, as if a phantom hand had just crashed down. Slowly, unnervingly, they rose, one after another, with a strange, viscous delay. I stood frozen, breath ragged. I fumbled for the phone, aiming it, trying to capture something, anything. Only the impassive bulk of the instrument met the light, its polished surface reflecting my own strained face. Checking the video feed revealed only darkness, punctuated by the sound of my own frantic breathing. No music, no movement. Looking back at the piano, I saw them, fresh fingerprints, the same pattern of smudges, now migrating towards the upper register. Leaning closer, my hands unsteady, I saw the impressions were elongated, the fingertips oddly wide, larger than my own. The remainder of the night was spent in a state of hypervigilance. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind seemed a prelude. Faint, fragmented tones teased the edge of my hearing whenever my attention strayed, vanishing the instant I looked directly at the piano. My shoulders ached with tension, my head throbbed. Dawn finally broke, painting the sky in bruised shades of gray. The ocean churned below, mirroring my own internal turmoil. Another night here was unthinkable. I began packing my tools, methodically, deliberately. One last time, I wiped the keys clean, a futile gesture of order in the face of the inexplicable. I would contact the agent later, report the instrument structurally sound, but afflicted by an issue beyond my expertise. let them find someone else, or simply accept its silence. My work here was done. There was no mechanical solution to be found. Before leaving, I made a final circuit, extinguishing the lights I'd used, closing doors against the encroaching damp. Back in the foyer, poised to exit, one final sound reached me from the room down the hall. A single, low note, guttural and resonant, like a bass string struck with excessive force, then abruptly muted. I didn't turn back. I didn't want to see the keys, didn't want to look for fresh smudges. I simply walked out, pulling the heavy door shut behind me. How to explain that piano? I still grapple with it. Every component, hammers, strings, pedals, keys, appeared functional, moved as expected, yet conspired in silence when played conventionally. And yet, the phantom chords, the fleeting notes heard only obliquely, the sounds my recorders refused to acknowledge. Those fingerprints, appearing and reappearing. No rational explanation presents itself. Only the pervasive sense of wrongness, the feeling of an inanimate object possessing a hostile awareness, rejecting my presence, my purpose. Seeing the mansion shrink in my rearview mirror brought a profound, visceral relief. Reaching the main road felt like surfacing for air. I would file my report, strings intact, mechanism responsive, yet plagued by an intractable silence. The memory of that silent instrument, punctuated by impossible sounds, remains lodged deep within me. Silence is my trade, my comfort, but not the suffocating, watchful silence I found in that house on the cliff. May I never have cause to return. Sleep, that elusive balm, evaded me again. 3 a.m. precisely. The ceiling above my bed began its nightly monologue, the measured tread of heavy soles across antique timber. Back, forth, back, forth. 6 months I'd resided within the aging brick confines of the Crestwood Arms, apartment 4B, and 6 months the spectral cadence had kept its punctual vigil. Initially, I dismissed it, the nocturnal eccentricities of an upstairs neighbor. Yet an intrinsic wrongness permeated those footfalls. Prone in the darkness, my gaze traced the faint cartography of water damage overhead, a geography of neglect. The steps adhered to their immutable ritual. 8 strides, presumably traversing the space between bedroom and living area, a pregnant pause, then 8 strides returning. Each footfall groaned protest from the protesting floorboards. The rhythm held fast, unvarying, unceasing, relentless. My phone cast a pale, accusatory glow. 4:13 a.m. A frayed nerve finally gave way. Blankets were flung aside, a worn t-shirt pulled hastily over my head, and I burst into the corridor's stale air. Silence reigned in the building, profound save for that damnable pacing above. Anemic fluorescent tubes flickered overhead, carving stark geometries of shadow onto the peeling floral print wallpaper. 23 steps, I counted, my bare feet adhering slightly to the worn linoleum, carried me to the stairwell's echo chamber. The 5th floor swallowed the light. Extinguished bulbs dotted the ceiling like missing teeth, their replacement indefinitely postponed. Here, the footsteps achieved a new immediacy, descending unmistakably from 5B, the apartment mirroring my own layout directly above. My fist hammered against the solid wood door, the sound booming unnaturally in the cloistered silence. No reply. The pacing persisted. Again I struck the door, harder, knuckles stingy against the unyielding surface. Still, nothing. The steps marched on, oblivious or deliberately indifferent. "Hey!" My voice, raw with fatigue and frustration, cracked the stillness. "It's past 4 in the morning. People are trying to sleep down here." Not a falter in the rhythm. 8 steps forward, pause, 8 steps back. Behind me, a lock turned. A door creaked open. Mr. Petrov, the building superintendent, materialized in striped pajamas, a hefty ring of keys dangling from his hand. A tuft of silver hair stood sentinel on one side of his head. "Mr. Vance, what business brings you up here at this ungodly hour?" "Someone in 5B, I rasped, gesturing wildly at the door. "Pacing, hours of it, every single night. I can't endure it any longer." Mr. Petrov's brow furrowed into deep lines. 5B, impossible." "What do you mean, impossible? I hear them plain as day right now." The inexorable footsteps underscored my words. "Apartment 5B, he stated, his voice low, has stood vacant these past 3 years. Not a soul has lived there since the Anderson family departed." I gaped at him. The footfalls echoed, insistent, undeniable. "But I hear..." He sifted through the keys on his ring, selected one, and inserted it into the lock. With a tortured groan of hinges, the door swung inward. An emptiness profound and absolute greeted us. Dust lay thick as velvet on the naked hardwood floors. No furniture, no inhabitants. Only bare walls and the intricate lacework of cobwebs festooning the corners. Yet the sound persisted, clear, immediate, pacing the dusty floor right before our eyes. Mr. Petrov's face drained of color. Wordlessly, he slammed the door shut, the sharp report echoing down the hall, and twisted the lock. "The Andersons," he murmured, a tremor feathering his voice. "Vanished mid-month. No warning, just gone. Left everything behind. Furniture, clothes, the lot. We had to hire cleaners to clear it out." "Why? Why did they leave like that?" He shook his head, his gaze drifting uneasily towards the locked door. "Spoke of seeing things, hearing things. Mrs. Anderson was near hysterics. Said the place itself was wrong. I figured them for trying to break the lease." He swallowed. Perhaps they weren't merely spinning tales. Retreating to my own apartment yielded no solace. Sleep remained a distant shore. My laptop screen glowed, illuminating a late-night excavation into the building's past. The Crestwood Arms, erected 1928. Nothing outwardly sinister in its documented history, just another pre-war structure settled into a quiet neighborhood's fabric. Then, a digital ghost emerged, a brittle newspaper scan from 1956. Murder on the 5th floor. A man, Arthur Hemlock, had ended his wife's life in 5B before taking his own, hanging himself in the bedroom. The article noted prior complaints from neighbors about disturbances, violent arguments, and later the incessant sound of pacing night after night. Above me, the phantom tread continued. 8 steps forward, pause, 8 steps back. The following day found me feigning illness from work, drawn instead to the hushed archives of the public library. A helpful librarian guided my search through microfiche and dusty local histories. More fragments surfaced. The first family to occupy 5B post-tragedy, also in 1956, fled within weeks, citing nocturnal footsteps. 1962, another abrupt departure. 1975, the same story. 1988, 1994, 2003, 2021, a repeating decimal of dread. Different names, different eras, identical complaints, always the footsteps. Sometimes other whispers surfaced, pockets of unnatural cold, objects displaced by unseen hands, the muffled sound of weeping in the dead of night. A woman in 94 swore she'd seen a man standing silhouetted in her bedroom doorway. The light revealed only empty air. The Andersons, according to a brief local news piece, had endured the longest, 8 months. Mrs. Anderson claimed sightings of the man became frequent, a silent observer lurking in the apartment's periphery. Their daughter developed a paralyzing fear of her own bedroom. Their son spoke of a heavy presence settling on his bed at night. Mr. Anderson confessed to hearing disembodied whispers when alone. That night, the 3 a.m. ritual commenced anew. Curled beneath my sheets, I listened, the knowledge of the apartment's history lending the sound a terrible weight. Each step now felt freighted with purpose, imbued with a cold, lingering fury. I envisioned Arthur Hemlock, trapped in a loop of rage and remorse, endlessly retracing his final fatal movements. Sleep was unthinkable. Dawn arrived, pale and indifferent. I called my landlord, tendered my notice. He registered no surprise, offering a full security deposit refund contingent on a swift departure, by week's end. Packing began immediately. Amidst boxing volumes of forgotten literature, a flicker of movement snagged my peripheral vision, a dark shape coalescing in my bedroom doorway. I spun around. Nothing. A trick of light, a shadow cast by fatigue. I rationalized. Yet an undeniable chill had seeped into the room. That night, the footsteps deviated. They abandoned their familiar circuit in the main room, drifting instead towards the bedroom area, towards the very spot where Hemlock had murdered his wife. I clutched my blanket, a useless talisman. The steps drew nearer, halting directly above my bed. Silence descended, thick and expectant. Then, a new sound. The distinct, protracted creak of a single floorboard, as if someone were slowly pivoting in place. A dreadful certainty crystallized within me. Whatever resided upstairs was no longer merely pacing. It was listening, waiting. A soft thud emanated from the far corner of my room. My head snapped towards the sound. For one heart-stopping instant, I perceived it. A tall, masculine silhouette, standing stark against the gloom. Then, obliteration. Gone. Scrambling from bed, my fingers fumbled for the light switch, trembling uncontrollably. Illumination flooded the room, revealing only the empty corner. But the air remained heavy, charged, like the static before a lightning strike. The footsteps resumed, altered. They moved now from the spot directly overhead to the corner where the figure had manifested. 8 steps, the same 8 steps that had haunted my nights for months, but the pattern now resonated with sickening clarity. Not random pacing, a path, from the bedroom's heart to the corner, the precise distance one might traverse carrying a burden, or a body. The remainder of the night I spent hunched in the driver's seat of my car. Daylight brought renewed investigation. Arthur Hemlock, the records confirmed, had strangled his wife in their marital bed. He then carried her lifeless form to the corner of the bedroom, laid her there, penned a confession, and finally hanged himself from a ceiling pipe. their remains lay undiscovered for 3 days. Movers were summoned. Remaining within those walls felt unbearable. I watched their progress from my car parked across the street, my gaze fixed on the inert facade of the Crestwood Arms. It appeared innocuous, mundane even, but my eyes kept returning to the windows of 5B. As dusk bled into the sky, staining the clouds violet and bruised orange, I saw it. Movement behind the dust-streaked glass. A shadow glided back and forth, 8 steps forward, 8 steps back. The pattern, starkly visible even from the street. The movers concluded their work near 8. I undertook one final grim tour of my vacated apartment. Bare walls, residual dust motes dancing in the weak light, scuff marks like faint scars, the only evidence of my tenure. Standing in the bedroom doorway, I stared at the corner where the figure had stood. For the first time since my arrival, the footsteps above had ceased. As I turned towards the exit, the temperature plummeted. My breath plumed white in the sudden cold. The air grew dense, pressing against my skin like a physical weight. Behind me, a floorboard creaked. I fled, down the 23 steps, through the lobby's faded grandeur, out into the anonymity of the street. Pulling away from the curb, a final glance upward, compelled by a force I couldn't name. A man stood framed in the 5th floor window, watching me leave. Even at that distance, his face was unnervingly distinct. He smiled. A motel room offered temporary refuge. Around 3 a.m., I awoke with a jolt. Silence. Absolute silence, broken only by the air conditioner's low hum and the distant sigh of traffic. No footsteps, no creaking wood. A new apartment materialized across town, smaller, costlier, the commuter trial, but blessedly quiet after dark. Yet sleep sometimes brought echoes, 8 steps forward, 8 steps back. In these nocturnal dramas, I am no longer the listener below. I am upstairs in 5B, an unwilling witness to the man's relentless pacing. He carries something shrouded in his arms, something heavy. Upon reaching the corner, he turns, his gaze meeting mine across the spectral divide. He smiles. Last week, driven by morbid curiosity, I checked the building records again. 3 different tenancies attempted in 5B since my departure. None lasted beyond a month. The apartment remains vacant. But late at night, observers on the street below sometimes report a shadow drifting behind the grimy windows. 8 steps forward, 8 steps back, on and on, until the first hint of dawn. Occasionally, insomnia steers my car back towards the Crestwood Arms. I count the windows, find the 5th floor, second from the end. Often, darkness prevails. But sometimes, he is there, treading his eternal circuit. Once, sensing my scrutiny, he paused mid-stride at the window, raising a hand in a gesture disturbingly akin to a friendly wave. I don't drive by anymore. Mr. Petrov, the superintendent, resigned last month. A chance encounter in a coffee shop revealed a man visibly aged, haunted. He confided that they struggled to keep tenants in my old apartment, 4B, now as well. The complaints are eerily familiar, footsteps in the dead of night. Not from the ceiling, though. These emanate from the corners of the bedroom itself. Pacing, they say. 8 steps forward, 8 steps back. I pressed him, asked if, in all his years servicing that building, he'd ever personally witnessed anything in 5B. He remained silent for a long moment, stirring his coffee with unnecessary diligence. Then, he spoke of the night he was tasked with clearing the Andersons' abandoned belongings. Alone in the apartment, dismantling a bed frame, he heard footsteps approach from behind. Turning, he saw a man carrying a bundle wrapped in a blanket. The figure walked deliberately to the corner, gently deposited its burden, then turned to face Petrov, and smiled. Petrov fled, leaving the job unfinished. The building owner hired an outside crew. They worked only during daylight hours, windows flung wide, every light blazing. Even so, 2 workers walked off the job before the apartment was finally cleared. Months have passed since I last set foot near the Crestwood Arms, but sometimes, in the profound quiet of my new home, late at night, a faint sound seems to drift on the edge of hearing. Distant footsteps, 8 steps forward, 8 steps back. Imagination, I tell myself, memory playing tricks, until last night. I woke at 3 a.m. The air in my bedroom was thick, glacial, and there, occupying the corner, stood a familiar shadow. It lifted its hand, slowly, deliberately, in greeting. 8 steps forward, 8 steps back. I'm moving again next week. A shard of laughter caught, sharp and sudden, in my throat, as my gaze fell upon Finn's vacant chair at the dining table. Scarcely heartbeats before he'd occupied it, weaving some terrible pun about the charred offerings on our plates. Now, emptiness. He had dissolved from sight, unraveled from the fabric of the moment. It was, though I couldn't fathom it then, merely the overture to a phantasmagoria poised to devour our halcyon weekend retreat. I am Elara. What commenced as a coveted escape with cherished friends devolved into a desperate scrabble for existence against an intangible stalker. The genesis was simple. 6 souls, myself, my partner Julian, and 2 other couples, Finn and Chloe, Leo and Maya, yearning for respite, had secured a lakeside cabin for an extended weekend. Months of anticipation had hummed beneath the surface, a shared desire to shed the city's clamor for nature's quiet embrace. The house, revealed on Friday's sun-drenched afternoon, felt like a whispered promise fulfilled. Tucked within a secluded cove, it commanded vistas of water mirroring an endless sky, framed by dense, watchful forest. Its bones were rustic, its heart comfortable, offering private berths for each pair and a generous common space destined for low-lit games and clinking glasses. That inaugural evening unfolded precisely as dreamt. We communed with smoke and flame on the deck, narratives and mirth mingling as the sun bled color into the lake. Later, gathered by the fire pit's flickering glow, we toasted marshmallows under a canopy pricked with starlight, cocooned in what felt like our own secluded cosmos. Saturday dawned with equal luminescence. Leo and Finn pursued watery quarry in the early mist, while the rest of us luxuriated over a protracted breakfast on the veranda. The day dissolved in a pleasant haze of sunshine, bathing cool lake water, shared meals, and the easy rhythm of companionship. Dinner, however, marked the precipice. We encircled the substantial table, plates laden with the aggressively seared steaks, a testament to Julian's ambitious grilling. Finn had just landed a particularly groan-worthy jest, eliciting a chorus of affectionate exasperation. I reached for the salt, a mundane gesture, but when my eyes returned to his place, Finn was simply not there. Initially, dismissal, a quick trip to the loo, perhaps, or fetching something forgotten from the kitchen. Yet, as silence stretched, punctuated only by the cicada's thrum, a cold knot tightened low in my belly. "Finn?" Chloe's query hung in the air, articulating the unspoken dread coalescing among us. His name, called out, echoed unanswered through the rooms. A sweep of the house, a scan of the immediate outdoors. Nothing. It was an erasure, clean and absolute. The evening's convivial spirit evaporated, replaced by a brittle tension. Rationalizations surfaced. A sudden solitary stroll, unnoticed. But conviction faltered. Finn wouldn't evaporate mid-sentence, mid-meal, without a word. A fundamental wrongness resonated deep within us. A fractured consensus led to a search. Leo and Maya descended the path toward the lake's dark mirror. Julian and I plunged into the woods flanking the cabin. Chloe remained, a lonely vigil keeper should Finn reappear. Pushing through the thick weave of undergrowth, our calls of his name swallowed by the trees. The unshakable sensation of being observed prickled my skin. The forest, benign and welcoming by day, now felt immense, suffocating, its shadows imbued with furtive movement just beyond the lie's grasp. An hour yielded only frustration and deepening fear. We converged back at the house to find Leo and Maya returned, their faces mirroring our own strained anxiety. Chloe wept silently, pacing the living room like a caged bird. "Police! We have to call!" Maya insisted, her voice trembling. Julian produced his mobile, but the stark "no service" insignia leered back. We'd anticipated patchy reception, but this utter severance felt deliberate, malevolent. The landline, I recalled, a flicker of hope. It died with the receiver's flat, dead tone. We were adrift, isolated, and diminished by one. Night deepened, amplifying paranoia. Each groan of the settling house became a potential footfall. We clustered in the living room, proximity our only shield against a fear too profound for solitude. Around midnight, Chloe, desperate for air, slipped onto the porch. The screen door's slap punctuated her exit. Less than a minute unfurled before a scream tore through the night, visceral and abruptly silenced. We surged outside. The porch stood empty, claimed by an impenetrable darkness. Raw panic ignited. Leo roared challenges into the void. Maya collapsed into shuddering sobs. Julian attempted solace, but his eyes reflected the same terror, gripping us all. Retreating, we secured every door, every window, transforming the house into a flimsy fortress. Sleep was an impossibility. We instituted a watch, though the nature of the threat remained terrifyingly ambiguous. As dawn's first fragile light touched the lake, a desperate strategy formed. Leo and Julian would brave the drive to the nearest town, summon aid. Maya and I would hold the fort, clinging to the frail hope of Finn or Chloe's return. Through the window, I watched them reach the car. The engine coughed, sputtered, then caught, a fragile spark of optimism. But as they navigated the long, winding drive, the vehicle lurched inexplicably, swerving violently into a thick-trunked oak. I saw their forms slump, inert. Maya and I flew outside, screaming their names, but before we could close the distance, a peculiar swirling mist enveloped the wreckage. When it dissipated mere seconds later, the car was untenanted. Leo and Julian, like the others, had been claimed. Terror, absolute and overwhelming, propelled Maya and me back inside. we barricaded ourselves within a bedroom, shoving a cumbersome dresser against the door. Huddled on the bed, we clung to each other, wreckage adrift on a sea of fear. "What is this?" Maya whimpered, her voice ragged. "Who is doing this?" I could only shake my head, thoughts splintering against the impossibility of the last 24 hours. The day bled away as we remained entombed, thirst and hunger ignored, fear our only sustenance. We traded sentinel duties, though true rest eluded us. It was during my watch, as the sun bled below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised colors, that I heard it, a faint, insistent scratching from beyond the door. Imagination, I told myself, until the doorknob began its slow, deliberate rotation. I jolted Maya awake, a finger pressed to my lips demanding silence. Together, we watched, paralyzed, as the knob turned fully, then stilled. A pregnant pause stretched, thick with dread. Then, impossibly, the heavy dresser barring the door began to glide across the floorboards, propelled by unseen force. Maya and I scrambled backward, pressing ourselves flat against the far wall as the door swung inward on an empty hallway. No intruder, no monster, just vacant space. Then Maya gasped, her eyes fixed, wide with primal horror. I followed her stare. There, captured in the antique mirror hanging opposite, stood a reflection that belonged to nothing present. It was elongated, skeletal, limbs stretched beyond human proportion. Its face, a smooth, featureless concavity, radiated utter emptiness. As we watched, frozen, one impossibly thin arm lifted, index finger extending, pointing directly at us. A profound, visceral pull resonated within me, as if invisible hooks had snagged my soul, urging me toward the impossible presence. Maya screamed, shattering the paralysis. We bolted, a blind flight through the house, and out into the swallowing embrace of the night woods. Branches clawed, the ground uneven beneath our frantic feet. Time lost meaning, direction was irrelevant. Then, abruptly, we burst from the tree line onto the cold asphalt of a road. Headlights approached, slicing the darkness, a potential salvation. We flagged the vehicle down, surely spectral figures ourselves, wild-eyed and disheveled. The elderly couple within, startled but compassionate, ferried us toward the distant lights of civilization and the nearest police station. The subsequent investigation yielded nothing. The lake house stood undisturbed, the surrounding wilderness holding its secrets close. No trace of our friends, no evidence of the figure from the mirror. Officially, it became a narrative of tragic accidents, perhaps amplified by stress-induced hysteria in isolation. But Maya and I carry the truth, a chilling certainty. Something hunted us that weekend, a presence utterly alien to our world, and sometimes, in the deepest hours of the night, I still perceive that faint spectral tug, a reminder that it lingers, perhaps waiting, patient, to reclaim what escaped. 6 friends journeyed to that lake house. Only 2 returned, and no dawn breaks without the weight of wondering about the others. Are they truly erased, or do they exist somewhere beyond comprehension, ensnared in a nightmare without end? One thing remains immutable. I will never again venture near that water. Some idyllic retreats are best preserved as phantom limbs of memory, forever aching with what was lost.